The day's nearly over, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm pleased to announce our Outlook keynote. Lansky has been a partner of the ITB and the ITB conventions for a long time, so many of you know him well. 2012 and 13, he even set the attendance record for keynote lectures here. Not bad. He is an international tourism thought leader, keynote speaker, travel journalist, and author of 10 books. He had a weekly syndicated travel column in over 40 newspapers for 5 years, hosted a travel channel show, and contributed to publications such as National Geographic Traveler, Reader's Digest, The Guardian, National Geographic Adventure, and Huffington Post. And today, he will talk about Rethinking the DMO, a smart tourism setup that emphasizes new development, better destination management, improved metrics, and experience design. Please give him a big hand, Doug Lansky.
Thanks.
Hi there.
Thank you.
Let's do one more voting question before you talk, okay?
Sounds great.
All right. So for those of you who don't know what the voting question is, there's a little white voting device attached to your chair. And we're going to have a question right there in a moment. Can we have it now? Right. And we have 3 choices, 3 options as an answer. And when I say please vote now, then you decide which one you take and press the according button. All right? So, what do you think of the traditional DMO? 1, it has become obsolete. 2, not yet obsolete, but needs to revise its philosophy. Or 3, it's fine the way it is. Please vote now.
Number 2. Sorry.
All right, so what do you think? What do you think? 1, 2, or 3?
What do I think they think? I think I'm gonna vote for number 2.
Let's see. Hey, you're right.
Look at that.
Nearly 80%. Cool.
I have a helpful audience. I just ask you a question. Just to start off with, I have my own question. And I know that when I put on a red tie today, I suddenly realized that Donald Trump has kind of ruined the red tie. And if I go like this, it kind of...
Well, then just don't go like this.
I spent a lot of time on the length now because I don't want to have it. And I know he's ruined a lot of other things, but he's also ruined the red tie. Anyway.
But see if you keep straight up, then it's even better.
If I stand like this, it's maybe okay.
Perfect, isn't it? All right, have fun.
All right. Let me make sure I got a clicker here. Is there a clicker? Here we go. Okay, so I have an interesting challenge for myself. I've been here at ITB for many years. I wanted to see if I could make, as the foundation for this keynote, the world's most boring slide. What is the world's most boring slide? The world's most boring slide is an organizational chart, how the organization functions. So I'm going to show it to you now for 3 seconds, and then it's going to be the last slide that I show it to you at the end of the keynote. Are you ready? Here we go. There it is. Who took a picture? You don't get to take a picture. All right, so when I was here last year, I posed a question to the audience. I said, who here thinks that tourism's a good thing and it's nice to have more of it? And every hand went up. And then I said, okay, of all of you put your hands up, who thinks it would be a good idea? Who would like to see more tourists right where you live? Tour buses parked outside your house, people driving by your apartment with their lenses, taking pictures where you live, crowding into your favorite cafes, going to your supermarket, taking over the playground where you go with your kids. Who would like to see that? Not one hand. So that's really one of the big issues in tourism. We want it for the money and the economic impact, but we kind of hate it in our own backyard. And we need to acknowledge these competing forces in tourism if we're ever going to move forward and progress into the future with all of this. So this is one of the things. When I speak at conferences, and I speak at, let's say, 25 to 30 a year all over the world, I hear one theme more than anything else. I hear the word more. Last year we had 3% more than the year before. Next year we're going to have 4% more. It's always more. And you're thinking, if we want to play this out a little bit, what about if your destination had the most? What if you had the most tourists in the world, like Spain or the US or France? Do they still want more? They do. Now, we know that we don't want tourism to be 100% of GDP. We know we don't even want it to be 80 or maybe even 50% of GDP, because the thing that affects tourism more than anything is stuff that we can't control. It's the economy, it's a bad storm, it's a disease outbreak, it's a terrorist attack, it's a currency devaluation. All of these things affect tourism more than any DMO in the world can do. So we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. What is the right level of tourism of GDP? We don't know. It's roughly 10% in many places on average. Some places like Barcelona have it around 12 to 15%. We don't know what the magic amount is. But we should figure that out and figure out what that number is and have a goal. That's really where we're going. I think these role of tourism organizations, they are always going to be changing. So we need to keep up with the times. And there's one guiding principle that I'm trying to use for this talk today, and it's this. You need to be doing other things that the other stakeholders can't do on their own that benefit the destination. What can't they do on their own, right? So let's just start out. Marketing and data. That's the basic one that they're all doing. They're marketing organizations. But the thing is, do big cities need a visitor info website? So here's New York. I just typed this in this morning. What to do in New York. If we scroll down some more, we'll see TripAdvisor, we see Airbnb, Time Out, Travel US News, Thrill List, Lonely Planet. There we go. If we go back into page 2, we can scroll down a little bit more. Wait, if we have to go back to this one here, there's the DMO website. It's one of a few things. Now let's just imagine if I click on it, it looks like that. What would happen if New York's primary visitor-facing website went down for a month? Would New York get one fewer visitor? Would someone be sitting in front of the computer and go, honey, the official website's down, I don't think we can get to New York? Does anyone even go there to book the trip? It's really like that DMO website is like one loaf of bread in the supermarket. If you took that loaf of bread away, would that person go, I guess we're not buying bread? No, you get something else. And so when you have a big city where there's all these other amazing producers of content, is that something that only the DMO can do? No. Is it a bad thing? No, but is it necessary? Here's the other question. Are you using the right data? So this is something that I got from Arrivalist. This is just their metric. So here's an example of how many arrivals per 147,000 clicks. And that's how they get that little data of arrivals per M is for 1,000. Okay? So in this instance, that's 1,000 people clicked on an ad, and 2.8 of them showed up in the destination. And the way they know this is when you're on Facebook and you click on the ad, it puts a pixel in your iPad or your iPhone or whatever you clicked on it with. And then when you show up in the actual destination within 2 years, it pings them. So they can see how long between you picked on, which ad you clicked on, and when you show up in the destination. And so they were able to do some really interesting studies. These are some from Wisconsin. So here's 4 themes. They advertised on Facebook with restaurants showing all their really nice food. They advertised their supper clubs. They advertised national attractions, and they advertised their tours. And this was what was really interesting. So if you look only at the click-through rate, you see that the restaurants with all that sexy food images, they had the highest click-through rate. Then came tours, then supper clubs, then natural attractions. But we don't really care about click-through rates. I mean, we shouldn't. The main thing is, did those ads get the people to show up? That's what we're looking for. And it turns out it wasn't quite as expected. If you're only looking at click-through rates, you would be badly mistaken. It was supper clubs that got the most people to show up. And then and then natural attractions, and then tours, and restaurants was last. So let's look at the data that matters and not the stuff that doesn't. Also, you can measure the impact. If you can combine it with a credit card reading, for example, you can see on the blue graphs, that's how much money was spent to bring those visitors to town. And the red, of course, this is bottom of funnel stuff. This doesn't include the top of funnel big advertising. Bottom of funnel, the blue is how much it costs them, and the red is how much they spend. And you can see by demographic, the hunters are spending a lot. Outdoor adventure travelers are spending a lot. Bird watchers, not so much. So it's interesting to see which demographics you should be spending your time and money targeting. And then I think it's really important that we start doing this. Look at the economic impact, which means we're not just looking at the number of visitors that come, and we're not looking at revenue. We're looking at profit. That's the name of the game. So to look at profit, we have to understand that there's different leakages. So if we take the people staying at chain hotels versus people staying at Airbnb with 100 euros, we know that in hotels, about that much goes to the franchise. It never even arrives in the city. It goes straight to corporate headquarters. And we know this much goes to corporate headquarters in Airbnb, about the same. But then we know often if they've booked through an intermediary with Booking.com, Expedia, you have an additional giant chunk that never arrives in your destination. Airbnb, nothing. Airbnb is now ahead on that score for the total economic impact. Then we know that a lot of the money stays in the destination. With Airbnb, it could be that almost all of it, 94% stays in the destination, or none of it does if it's a foreign-owned property. So you might want to adjust your policy making with Airbnb to tax people differently if you want to take advantage of that. This is how many guests per employee that are employed through the hotel industry. You could say it's 1-to-1. If it's one person renting out their bedroom, it's a 1-to-1. Employs one person per person. It's a better employment operator, unless you get into people who are doing it commercially, in which case, who knows how many properties they're renting out. That's a little bit harder to say. You could say that the hotels are less cultural. You could say with Airbnb, it's more cultural, but it's hard to affect how much they're spreading, unless you have some strict policies, and control the cultural impact of having too many in one spot. It's easy to tax for hotels, and it's actually easy to tax in Airbnb. I was speaking to Nate from Airbnb earlier. He said they've paid out something like $400 million globally in taxes. You just have to get on board with them and get them to pay the taxes to you. But it's easy to do. I wanted to look at this. What are Berlin's tourism economic costs, right? We know there's this many daily average overnight visitors. There's 31 million annually coming to Berlin. We know roughly how many liters of water per day that they use, so we can calculate how much that costs. I did this, by the way, this isn't terribly accurate. I did it quickly. I didn't triple check all my numbers here, but it's an approximation. We know how much electricity they use a day. We know what that costs. We know how much garbage they use a day. We know how much the credit cards are taking. We know how much the hotel franchise fees are. And we know how much these other fees are taking along the way. That's roughly 1.5 million euros a day in expenses or in leakages that never even arrive here. Annually, we're talking about €500 million to Berlin alone that either disappear or never arrive to start with. That has to be factored into the equation if we're talking about profit. And if we're looking at this like a business, which we need to be doing more of. There should be something like this. These are completely made up numbers. I just randomly made them up. But let's say you have a day of an overnight guest in a hotel. Let's say they're spending $330, and let's say that's how it kind of breaks down. Then there's going to be a breakdown on that side, and you're going to get a yield. You're going to get a profit for every kind of visitor. It'd be great if you had 20 of these, and you could see what it is for a hotel guest versus what it is for a camper and every other demographic. And then you can start to see what's the profit of each guest, not just the revenue. That's data we need to get, and that nobody's doing. Nobody that I know of. So there we got the first one. We got events. Now we talk about a website. The one place you definitely need a website is mice, because nobody else is going to do that. So coming back to my rule, is this something that no one else is going to do? Correct. Mice is a great thing to have a website for. You're going to have your HR. You need to have your finance. Service and education. Better, I believe, to teach them how to fish than to fish for them. Rather, that means show them how to get a big social media following for all your stakeholders in your community, in your city, in your destination, versus getting all the traffic to your website and then pushing it out to them and getting them used to that. Show them how to make a great hotel sign that people can see from a distance and at night, and it's nicely designed. Show them how to help set up their website for it's mobile friendly, so it looks great, so it's engaging. And also have a great service program. Make sure that they're helping each other in the destination to improve their service across the board. So that you're taking, if you've got a great hotel, that means taking the people at the front desk and saying to them, we need to get some other people in here, like people from the museum who don't get this great front desk training to learn how to provide great service. So spreading service around the industry. Whoops, looks like we skipped one. There we go. Advocacy and city planning. A lot of people do advocacy, but it's often a separate entity. I'm not saying, by the way, this all has to be done in this little magical rainbow wheel. This is just one version of it. But these are some of the pieces of the puzzle that are often missing. City planning, especially. A lot of places are ignoring how important that is. When I talk to destination after destination that seems to be doing it right, they're all doing this. They say, get a seat at the table with the city planning. Every time they have a meeting, make sure that the tourism voice is heard. If they're considering 2 or 3 different designs, they can turn to you and say, hey, you're 15% of our GDP. What do you think tourists are going to think of this building versus that building? And you can get to weigh in on it and influence the way the product is or how it affects your brand. Moving right along. Now we're talking about the stewardship of culture and nature. Vastly overlooked. And wouldn't it be great in a tourism organization where you had these kind of checks and balances? So you weren't just marketing, but that CEO had to balance the marketing with someone who was doing this and weighing that in, because we see garbage on the beach all over the time. It's getting written up in the newspapers. I could show you 20 minutes of solid articles in newspapers about garbage on beach, garbage in parks, garbage on trails. You've seen it yourselves if you walked around, and it's not nice. And we see stuff like this more and more. Places that are feeling like they're turning into theme parks. People are visiting cities, but not to have it feel like that. We need to protect the culture. And this is how it looks. This is like a real-world example. This is in Copenhagen. If we just want to zoom in on one of the main squares there, you've got Ripley's, believe it or not, KFC, Burger King, 7-Eleven, and McDonald's signs straight up. That's just in one camera angle. And if we could see down that street about 15 meters, you'd see 5 more chains. We need to make sure these places feel interesting because we know the reason people travel is to experience something that they don't have at home. And they have all this junk at home. We need to let them feel special. These destinations need to feel unique. I love to see this. I know it's difficult, and I spoke to the CEO of Amsterdam Marketing. That's not easy for them to do, but it's a great first step. It's a great first step. Kudos to them. Also to Guam. These guys have really taken beautification to another level. The island of Guam has gone bananas. I would say the last I spoke to them, they spend at least 1/3 of their marketing budget on cleaning up and doing landscaping. They're doing great stuff, and they have all these task force cleaning the island and keeping it really nice. Product development. That's another big piece of this equation. How do we do that? Now, if I show you some really cool products, you may have seen a lot of these before, an underwater museum that's just starting up, the sky slide on the side of a building, these backwater tours in India, looking at the safaris by hot air balloon, of course the overwater bungalows. This way to see in Finland that they're showing the northern lights that you lay in these little glass igloos and look up. Really clever product. Or at the ice hotel, and this is why product is so important. They've just made a year-round ice hotel in northern Sweden. So it doesn't melt and they rebuild it every year. Now they've got a permanent ice hotel somehow. And just in the last year, I spoke to the PR director. This is what their reach. They had 7.5 billion in media reach this year. And that, depending on how you calculate that, they said it's about 127 million euros of free advertising for just having a really cool product. They didn't have to lift a finger or spend a dime to get that much money. That's what's so amazing. Tesla is doing something similar with their great product. This is what's tricky about this whole thing, is none of those things were done by the DMO. Same with bungee jumping. It's all some person with a vision and a lot of money to spend or willing to take a giant bank loan and risk their future and try that stuff. So what's the role of the DMO? Maybe something that's a little bit more concrete, like providing the infrastructure. Like toilets. This is a Dutch company that's really clever called To The Loo. They put in these business quality toilets all over the city. That's cool. Maybe they can put them in, but the tourism role, the DMO, can connect them and make it easy for people to use somehow, which I'll get to in a little bit. They can do some beautification projects. Some are doing things like this, creating a new product like an ale trail with the help of software, like places like Banwango. And the one here, there's like a calligraphy course in Japan. I know Airbnb is doing a lot of stuff like that. So this doesn't necessarily have to come from the DMO. It could. If no one else is doing it, it's a real easy thing for the DMO to pick up that slack, or at least to get on board with Airbnb or other stakeholders to help make it happen. But that's a great thing to see new product coming out, providing it's brand aligned. And that's really the trick to the whole thing. How do you keep it brand aligned? If your whole thing is we're outdoor adventure, and then someone wants to build the world's biggest go-kart track, and you're talking about hiking trails, how do you say to that stakeholder that they can't? That's where it gets really hard. That's when you often need to proactively come out with a very strong brand, Get people on board early, be proactive in finding and recruiting the kind of people to partnership with, and say you'll support them with marketing to help launch things to build upon the brand versus playing defensively and having to say no to lots of things. This is a really tricky part of the equation. And I do want to leave some time at the end of this so we can get some questions on this, because a lot of this stuff isn't easy. We're getting close now. Carrying capacity, spending, visitor experience. This is a huge one. Talked about this before. This is an old way to improve visitor experience, which is to put up, this is actually a visitor center. I think it's in Montana. That's a visitor center. It's crazy that they're spending that kind of money. But this was before the internet, before mobile phones, before Siri, before websites, before mobile-friendly web stuff. There is a more cost-effective way to do all that. And by the way, all those big things are disappearing. Lots of cities are starting with this. You can have someone that's based off-site that you can just connect to over online, and they can answer your questions if you want to have a personal person, or there's people on bicycles, segways, and vans, and all sorts of things doing pop-ups. It's another way to do the same thing more cost-effectively. We know, by the way, in cities around the world that I've surveyed, and I've done about 30 of them, about 1 to 1.5% of the visitors in a city walks into the tourist information office, depending on where it's situated. And of that 1% that walk into the tourist information office, about half of them are there to use the toilet. So let's say you're spending 100,000 euros to staff and keep that place rented in the center of the city. That's an expensive toilet, which is about what it is, because you can get the information somewhere else. Here's a more important role, I think. Figure out how many visitors your city, your destination can handle. Does anybody done this in this room? Has anybody, I'd like to see you, not how many people can stay in your hotels, but I would think of it this way. You're often used to bringing in media. When are you going to tell the Guardian or the New York Times travel writer to show up where you think it's great weather, great conditions, but not quite too busy that they're going to be put off by the number of visitors? Has anyone done a count and really figured out what the optimal number of visitors is in their destination? Can I see a show of hands? Has anybody done this? You've done this. Which destination? In Ecuador you've done this. The whole country or in one city? In a very small community in Ecuador. Has anyone else done it? I'm a bit blinded up here. Any other hands? Right back here. Where have you done it? A ski area? A ski area in Austria, you said? Okay. And is it you've done this calculation because you know the lift capacity of the mountain? That's kind of cheating. But it's a good answer. But it's good that you've done it. But it's great to start thinking this way, and I'm glad to see there are at least some people in this room who are thinking in that direction. Because we know we don't want it to look like this. You recognize this as Dubrovnik. Croatia has a logo that fits nicely with this. It's full of life. I know they're trying to regulate this number, and I know it's not easy, but I had to have a little joke at their expense, nonetheless. So without management, these destinations, and I would say versus over-tourism, and maybe a more accurate word is unbalanced. I sort of like unbalanced versus over-tourism. And here's why I say that. Because here, you've got these enterprises that are making a ton of money, and they've got their capacity numbers that they're bringing into this imaginary destination. The cruise ships are trying to bring in as many as they can, so are the tour bus companies, so are the airlines, and so are the hotels. As many as they can really get away with and keep their occupancy rates high enough to make it worthwhile. They don't care how many the attractions hold. And let's say the attractions hold this imaginary amount. And if we add that up, they're bringing in 30,000 people, but the things that they came to do are only 9,500. That's the imbalance. And you don't see that at theme parks because they calculate that stuff. And they make sure when they add a new ride that they add a new toilet, that they add a new kiosk, that they add a new snack stand. They make sure it grows holistically. Destinations need to get on board with this. That's the way it's headed. Wouldn't it be great? I tried to think of what would be the coolest graph for a smart destination to have. And I came up with this imaginary graph. Imagine if you could see this. So the blue is your current level of visitors, and the orange bit on top is your capacity. So you could see you're not near capacity for public toilets. You've got a little bit more room to grow with bus parking. But you can see with the airport, if the airport starts hitting capacity, everybody else is out of whack. What you want ideally is for that blue line to be straight across, right? And so how do you try to achieve that unless you even have this kind of information at your fingertips? That's what we need to get. That would be great to see. And then spreading out the visitors is a common way to solve over-tourism. I don't believe in it. Depending. There's examples where it works, but generally, Amsterdam has done a really nice job at this. They've even renamed their beach the Amsterdam Beach so that it sounds closer, so that people go to it. They've renamed a castle Amsterdam Castle so that it's closer, it sounds closer to Amsterdam and people will go to it. And they've extended their transport card to make the surrounding areas easier to access. It's totally clever. And it's like a Band-Aid in my mind. And here's the reason. They've branded a lot of the neighborhoods. And the idea is that these neighborhoods are supposed to be really cool, and they're supposed to be really hip. And you're going to go there, and you're going to have an authentic experience that's different from what you get in the city center, which is packed with tourists. But here's what happens, right? If you look here, these are the things it recommends in one of these neighborhoods. This is an interesting question. How many tourists can sit here at this cool local place before a local person would look at that and go, it's touristy now? I don't know. What do you think? Could you put about 4 or 5 people there? 2? 7? It's not many. When you're talking about an authentic experience, it doesn't take many tourists for it to suddenly feel corrupted by tourism, which means that even here at that little rooftop cafe, you could put probably 5 or 6, and at that market, you could put maybe 10. I don't know. Here, you could put a couple. But we're talking about a tour bus full of people at the most, even if they spread themselves out. And that's why I don't believe in it in the long term. And there's a theory behind this that actually comes back to Wired Magazine did an interesting piece. It's the same exact thing. When you add more lanes, you think it's going to solve the traffic problem, but they've shown again and again it just makes traffic worse. Because what happens is these lanes get bigger, they hold more people, but when you get to the exit to get off the highway, and there's more cars trying to get off, then it creates a backlog getting off the highway, and then it jams up the motorway. So it doesn't work. And it's the same thing in tourism. If you try to spread it out and get the capacity, you're going to get a similar kind of log jam experience. I like this woman who's a Harvard professor or teacher, Megan Epler-Wood. I just wanted to share one quote from her. The folks have been protesting are from highly visited destinations, and they don't feel their lives should be interrupted by tourism. That we need to listen to that stuff. Or here at Skift, Andrew's been writing a lot about over-tourism. You've probably read his stuff. Stakeholders should be looking forward and planning to craft a more equitable environment for both tourists and locals, even if it means reducing tourism and those who have built successful businesses serving them. That's hard to be a capitalist and be looking at that. It's like we need to reintroduce the cap back into capitalism somehow. Because that's really what it's going to take for this whole thing to work. What about this? What if you could increase your profit, but without bringing any more visitors? Wouldn't that be sort of the magical fix to a lot of this? Up to a certain level. Disney just did it. Disney World Florida went down in visitors, and their profit went up. Wow. How the heck did they do that? Well, it's by getting rid of lines. It's by getting people to spend more in advance. It's by creating less friction as they go through, as it's wasting their time with other things, keeping people in the consumer loop, and being smart with their pricing. These are things that destinations can do as well. If you stay open, we know that in tourist areas, about 40% of the shopping happens after 6 p.m. In Copenhagen, the whole city shuts at 6 p.m. That's a lot of lost money. If they're looking to do that, for example. And they're not alone. A lot of other places do that. And you can't just be one random shop here and there. It needs to be a lot of traction in an entire block that's staying open later. So here we go. Oh, I guess we're going to click through. Nice. All right. There's the last one. There we go. Right there. Digital integration. This, I think, is the most interesting part of it, and maybe the single biggest role that will actually help with everything else. We've managed to put electricity into every home almost across the planet, with the exception of a lot of the developing and underdeveloped world. That's a huge thing. We've managed to bring fresh water in and take sewage out of every home in Europe and the US and North America and most of South America as well. That's a huge thing. What I'm talking about here with digital integration, it's nothing. It's a billionth of the kind of investment. And this is what we've seen them do it at Disney with their magic bands. These bands do an awful lot of cool stuff. It's payment, it gets them in, it's their room key. We've seen in places like Vail has developed the Epic Mix, where they have this app that's connected to your lift card, and it gives you a progress of how much you've skied every day and which lifts you've used, gives you little badges for doing certain things. It takes photos, they take the photo, it pops up right on your app within minutes. It's pretty cool. And now these guys here in Germany have actually started extending this. They do have a ski resort, and they've extended into the destination. They have a water park, and that's kind of what started when they got all these smaller villages in the Black Forest to sign on. And they got people on board with this card, and they have this great visitor card, and you can use free BMWs while you're there, included with your card, to share the ride. And you have, this is what it looks like. This is their card, and there's the Black Forest.
Okay, just landed in.
One second, we're going to stop this here. I wanted to do this little video to show the future of tourism without any robots doing backflips, without any hyperlooped trains. I'm talking the future 5 years out, realistically, and I wanted to do it with an iPhone in one day using only my 13-year-old daughter as a camera person. And I edited it myself with iMovie in 10 minutes to show the entire, this is my challenge, to do the entire future of tourism in a 2-minute video. So let's roll this head.
Okay, just landed in Stockholm. Imagine if the entire city was connected so you could enjoy a tourism experience with the ultimate ease and facility.
It's a pity the Academy Awards have already been given out earlier this year. So the hotels handle the distribution. Not going to win any prizes for best musical score on this. Best male lead in fast walking. And if time-ticketed entry, there's no waiting anywhere. And as our last speaker just said, we reduce the friction of the entire visitor experience. We don't want it to feel like a theme park. We just want it to feel easy.
Go.
How do you want to pay?
I'm going to use my city card.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, that didn't work. Yeah, I'm back at the airport now, and they actually do have these chairs at the airport in Stockholm. So that's my view of what a modern tourism frictionless experience could look like in the near future, and I think will look like. And where I think it could also be really interesting to DMOs is that the effort here is connecting all the attractions. And the attractions would rather have open heart surgery than have to change in any way or adopt a new access program. So you have to integrate with them in the short term, but then by hook or by crook, get them on the same platform a few years down the road as their contracts come up, and get everybody in that destination on one common platform, and that becomes really easy to do. The trick is that they're all on different platforms, but to have them all on one platform makes that extremely easy, and you can add all sorts of goodies. And so you get the visitor experiences improved, it's less friction, more time to enjoy, you get amazing data, incredible data. You can see what different people from different countries do at different times of day, how they move, consolidate the inventory. This is really interesting here. I spoke about this last year. So if you've got all your inventory in one place, it's not okay, a city card is like you carrying a big thing of water into your apartment and then using that water for the day. This is like indoor plumbing. This is an integrated thing. So when you put it up all on, let's say, Expedia, and you're booking a flight and you're booking hotels, and then you can go, oh, all 10 out of 10 of the biggest attractions in that city are fully booked. Guess I want to go to some of those, so I'll change my dates a little bit and go when I can get into those things. Okay, so now you've spread out tourism throughout the week, you've increased it throughout the year. There's much fewer valleys in your system. Yes, there's times when the peaks aren't as high, but you're spreading it. And people always talk about spreading it, but when you spread it, it means that you need to also reduce the peaks. You can't just fill up the things that are on the low end. So they can see it when they're booking, sends out relevant deals. So imagine you're walking around with this phone, and suddenly it says, oh, it's 20% off at this museum in 20 minutes. You're going to say, do you want to go? You can get great deals and push notifications that are relevant. You can fill the gaps, extend the season, and you can increase visitor spending. There's no waiting. When they're not waiting, they're not outside the consumer loop. And Torsten, are you here somewhere? He said he was going to be here. I can't see. Say hello. I can't hear you. He's not here. Anyway, he is here. He's doing this in his destination, and it's working. I promise this is going to be the last slide that I share with you today. This system is up and working in his destination. It doesn't do all of this, but it's happening. It's happening as we speak. And I think in 5 or 10 years, a lot of destinations are going to have this. That's my prediction for the future. Thank you very much for entertaining me. And I want to make sure we save some time. If we have some time, we have a few minutes. Did you want to come up, or should we can field a few questions? I hope I got people thinking. Yes, please. How do you put the human, his question was, how do you put the human contact back into a digital world? Great question. So I was speaking with the Vasa Museum in Stockholm about this kind of a solution. And they said, well, we like that people interact with us when they come into our attraction. I said, okay, how does it work today? In the Vasa Museum in Stockholm, the most crowded, popular attraction in Scandinavia, the teller, the money taker, sits behind like bulletproof glass and takes money from people and gives them a little ticket stub and then lets them in. What if they came in with a city card, they walked through one of these nice glass gates, and they were handed a pair of those cheap little headbuds and said, would you like some free, welcome to the museum, would you like some free headphones? By the way, we have free wireless, we have free Wi-Fi here in the museum, and there are free audio tours that you can take with this headphone. It's part of the cost of your ticket. Welcome in. Isn't that a nicer way to welcome them than just taking their money? There's other ways you can definitely introduce the human element back into it in a much more welcoming and warm way, I think. Great question, though. Do we have any other questions? Yes? Do we have a microphone?
Thank you. Yeah, microphone, because this question is probably, I don't even know if there's an answer. This question is as much to you as it is to all the other wonderful colleagues sitting here. Just before I came to the ITB, I read a lot of statistics about how tourism is growing, how tourism is booming, and then we come to the ITB, and then we hear this word over-tourism. And I know Angela Merkel, our chancellor, spoke about it. You spoke about it here. I understand. I'm not naive to think that tourism can continue to grow and continue to grow. But personally, I don't know. Somehow, as a tourism professional, it feels just wrong to say reduce tourism. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know how the other colleagues here feel as well. To say, yes, to find ways of managing it, yes, but to say, as for tourism, or to tell tourism professionals to reduce the number of tourists coming into a destination, I don't know, somehow feels wrong to me. I don't know what your...
Okay, I'm going to get to, and I want other people to chime in if they want to do it, but I'm going to take a stab at it first. You can stand if you want, or sit, whatever's most comfortable. So I would not say, would you say like this, where are you from? Which country?
India.
You're from India. Which city?
Goa.
In Goa. Do you have a nice hotel in Goa? In your nice hotel in Goa, do you think that they tell people to go away? No. But they tell people when the hotel is full. How do they tell them that? They just online, when you try to book on that day, it says we're full. Are they telling them to go away? No. They're just providing a clear picture into the supply and demand on that date. And what I'm suggesting is one possible solution for this is that if attractions, because people don't go to Barcelona because they think, oh, I want to stay in a hotel, I'll stay in a hotel, or I want to sit on an airplane, I'll just fly to Barcelona. They go to Barcelona or to Paris or to New York to do specific things in that city. So if you're going to go, for example, to see a Arsenal football match or a Barcelona football match, you're probably going to buy the ticket to the football match before you even buy your flight or your hotel. If you're going to go hear a Beyoncé concert in London, you're going to buy your Beyoncé ticket before you buy that. We just had to learn to do that stuff in reverse. So if they're looking at the attractions first, and they book that either first or at the same time, they'll see when there's availability. If you're going to go to a nice restaurant and you call them up because you saw a great review, and they say, oh, we're booked this Friday. And then do you say, oh, we'll never go to the restaurant? You might, but more likely you'll say, well, when do you have a booking? And they'll go, we'll get you in 2 weeks on Friday or during the week. And that's the mechanism. Just by showing transparency of supply and demand, you're not telling one, if someone comes to the city and they want to stay with their relative and do no attraction visiting, they don't care, they'll come. But there's people today who fly with their families from, say, London all the way to Peru, they get to Cusco, and then they find out they can't get into Machu Picchu. They spent 12,000 euros to get everyone there, and they can't get into the thing they came to do. That's a real pity. If we have a better integrated system, we can keep that kind of stuff from happening and let it be self-policing, just showing the supply and demand and let them self-regulate, I think is one of the easiest ways forward. But like you said, we should throw it out. Does anyone else have a different kind of answer that you'd like? It's not the only way. Does anyone else have another answer? Yeah, go ahead. Wait till the microphone comes flying up here.
Like for me, it's about the different interests. So some hotel might be full and the neighbor would be free. And it's about the thinking, no, like I send guests away to my competition. But how would you address that the stakeholders work together in a destination, like really work together in the sense that, okay, now it's full,
right,
but we have space. We're a small cafe outside the city, like
right,
the one that you showed.
Okay, tourism in my mind is very much a teamwork sport for a number of different reasons. If someone goes to a restaurant in your city, which city are you from?
Vienna.
You're from Vienna. If someone goes to any restaurant in Vienna, from where I live in Stockholm, and they get food poisoning at some little place, and they go back home and their friend says, oh, I saw you were in Vienna, how was it? They go, oh, food poisoning. And then they don't say anything else. They don't ask them which restaurant it was. They just assume that all the restaurants in Vienna have food poisoning. It is great. People love to tell the worst of the stories. If they got ripped off by a taxi driver, if the hotel room was messy. So it benefits the whole destination if the service level is high everywhere. That's for starters. The other thing is, and this is maybe the harder thing to understand, and here's a great example of it. I spoke in Bermuda just before they got the America's Cup. And I asked in a room about this size, about this many people, I said, how many people make their income in this room directly from sailing? And there was like one hand up that did some charters or a sailing school out of about 500 people. And I said, well, pretty soon you're going to get a chance to try on a really interesting jacket. You're going to be able to try on having a branded product that has nothing to do with how any of you make your money. And I said, yet you're all going to benefit enormously from it. So in that same vein, what happens is the DMO might say, we're going to be the zipline destination. And the person who's got the mini golf thing says, well, I don't want to do that. I want it to be about me. It's like having Messi on your football team, right? You're not going to be the star anymore, but your salary is going to go up. You're going to make a ton more money. A lot more people are going to see you. It's going to bring greater wealth to your community, but it won't be about you. And if you can be a big enough person to understand what the big draw is in your community and get behind that so that if they see that people are coming for the zip line and say, absolutely, let's be the zip line destination and let's own that, and we know they're going to spend 15 euros on the destination to go zip lining, and then they're going to spend 150 to stay at my hotel. Let them come for the zip lining, what do I care? You're going to make the real money doing something else. And if you can have that understanding and be selfless enough to say it's not about me, and allow the DMO to pick a brand that's very niched, you will win. The niche brands. I go to so many destinations and I say, so what are you thinking of as a brand? And they'll say, we want to be the outdoor city. Yeah, you and 6 million other cities. right? And so you need to find a niche that's really specific that you can absolutely own. And those are the places with the strongest brand that are going to future-proof themselves as much as possible. Great question. We have time for one more. Are we doing okay? This is the last one of the day. We're running out the clock. We do one more or two more? One more. Yes, right here.
My question is,
Can you hold on 1 second? I'm just going to...
my question is, I like the idea about integration, but I kind of imagining countries and cities which don't have the infrastructure that Stockholm has. I can think of, for example, Kyrgyzstan, which is beautiful and amazing, or I'm from Mexico, Tijuana, Baja California. How would you propose these destinations or countries that would like to actually try out the integration without having the infrastructure that is already here in Europe? Like, is there like a more analog kind of way? Have you thought about that?
I'll give you an analog way and a super budget discount way. So the analog way is, let's say you're in a smaller town, you're staying in your hotel, and it's in a smaller village where everybody knows everybody, right? So you go to the bird watching tour, and the bird watching tour guy knows the hotel GM, and so when you sign up to do the bird watching tour at the hotel, you just tell him, I'll sign it to my room. You can go around the whole village and have arrangements and just sign stuff analog back to your hotel room, pay it on the bill when you check out. That's the analog way to do the same thing, to integrate it that way. The next step up is that all those museums and so forth that don't have subways, you can do it on your mobile. It's like an Uber app. The tour guide, the museum, they just have their cell phone or an old cell phone, the one that they were going to give to their kids because they dropped it on the floor, and they just download the app on it, and they take a picture of the barcode when the person comes on the back of the bracelet or the key because it has a barcode on it. Or it can even have, if you have a Samsung phone, you've got NFC reading there capabilities. Super cheap. Shouldn't have to spend a cent. That's the cheap way to do it. And it's all that's doable. We're going to have to end it there. I'm going to have to jump off the stage. You guys have had a long day, I'm sure. There's a lot of parties going around here offering free beer and snacks. Make sure you take advantage on your way out before you get right into the long taxi queue. Have a great rest of your ITB, and it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.